Jenny's suitcase sat half-packed on the bed, the zipper hanging open like the quiet tension in the room. She wasn't rushing. Each shirt folded, each scarf tucked away was deliberate, slow, almost ritualistic. And Sumit, sitting cross-legged on the floor, wasn't saying anything. He didn't have to. You could see it in his posture. The slight slump of his shoulders, the way his gaze followed her movements without interruption. This wasn't another fight. This was years of love slowly cracking at the edges, a quiet collapse that no camera drama could fully capture. Their story started like a dream, a whirlwind romance that captured the hearts of fans. The older woman, the younger man, the cross-cultural excitement. It all felt like a rom-com scripted for reality TV. But the cameras couldn't film the nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the ways she had compromised herself for love. You remember the scandals, right? The family drama, the secret wives rumors, the cultural shockwaves. Fans lived through it with them. They cheered for every reunion and gasped at every confrontation. And now, years later, the audience wasn't watching fireworks. They were watching silence, slow and devastating. On camera, their wedding had been perfect. The smiles, the grand ceremony, the Bollywood-level extravagance. It looked like love had won. But behind closed doors, the reality was entirely different. Sumit believed love was the solution to everything. If you loved someone enough, you could conquer culture, criticism, and distance. He didn't see the undercurrent, the quiet erosion of someone giving everything while receiving just enough to keep going. He leaned on the familiarity of his own world, the comfort of routines, of parents and friends who were always nearby. For him, marriage was a shield. For Jenny, it was a cage. Jenny's sacrifices were enormous. She left her country, her family, her work, her familiar streets, and even the safety of knowing who would have her back. She entered a culture that never fully embraced her. Every visit to Sumit's parents reminded her of her outsider status. A whispered comment at a family dinner, a glance that lingered too long. These were small cuts, repeated daily. She smiled, nodded, said, "It's okay," when nothing was okay. That smile became armor, hiding the slow gnawing of dignity being chipped away piece by piece. And the audience rarely saw these moments. The subtle social cues, the quiet tension over a misinterpreted gesture, the tiny silences that spoke volumes. Sumit tiptoed around family disapproval, thinking a gentle approach was enough. Jenny absorbed it all. Every unacknowledged effort, every ignored boundary, every moment she had to shrink herself to preserve peace became invisible weight. Each day added another invisible pound. Fans might remember the laugh, the smile, the hand-holding on camera, but the real story happened in the pauses, the empty moments between scenes where survival mattered more than spectacle. You could almost measure her erosion by the change in her on-camera presence. The woman who once held her ground now softened her voice. The one who debated, who challenged, who fought for respect, now calculated her words like currency. Even small gestures, like touching her scarf or adjusting a chair, carried layers of fatigue and silent endurance. Sumit interpreted the peace as progress. For Jenny, it was exhaustion. The marriage wasn't collapsing in one grand argument. It was slowly unraveling under the weight of constant, subtle neglect. And then there were the moments fans didn't catch. The sideways glances at family dinners, the subtle tightening of her lips when someone made an offhanded comment about her age or accent, the careful navigation of public appearances, the constant mental calculations. What can I say? What should I avoid? How much of myself can I leave here without angering someone? All these small moments added up. They created cracks that no wedding ring, no declaration of love could fill. The grand gestures on TV had their sparkle, but they never masked the daily reality of emotional labor that Jenny carried alone. Sumit's perspective was easy to misunderstand. He thought love was active, but he interpreted it passively. Showing affection on camera, saying the words, planning small gestures, he believed that was enough. He didn't see the cumulative toll of emotional neglect. The way constant compromise without reciprocation becomes a silent erosion of identity. He trusted that loyalty would hold her, that her commitment was unshakable. And for a long time, it worked. Jenny stayed, smiled, survived. But survival has limits. There's a breaking point no amount of camera magic or vows can hide. And the small moments of neglect, the microaggressions, the invisibility, they add up. Slowly, invisibly, they carve out the space between two people until one day, you notice how far apart they really are. Jenny's exit wasn't spontaneous, it was the inevitable outcome of long term imbalance. The wedding didn't fix anything. Her love didn't shield her from the weight of cultural friction or emotional labor. She gave everything, and Sumit gave enough to sustain appearances. That's it. Fans might have laughed at the drama, rooted for them during reconciliations, cheered when it looked like they could conquer the odds. But all of that paled compared to the quiet erosion that was happening off screen. She smiled through disrespect. She managed every family interaction like a diplomat. She hid her pain behind charm and humor. And every time Sumit praised progress, she counted the costs. Every small compromise, every softened word, every ignored insult was another piece of herself slowly fading away. The tension was building, unnoticed by many. Viewers were waiting for the next fight, the next screaming match, the next betrayal. But here's the twist. Those classic moments weren't coming. Instead, the story was hiding in plain sight. Jenny's quiet endurance, the invisible burden she carried, the compromises no one cheered for. The bigger the smile she wore, the more it masked the reality. And Sumit, blissfully unaware, continued to rely on love alone, assuming it could bridge the gap. You won't believe how long she carried this weight alone. And yet, even amidst the invisible erosion, there were moments of hope, or at least illusions of it. A softened word from Sumit, a small acknowledgement on camera, a rare moment when he tried to defend her, these felt like victories. But in reality, they were like sprinkling water on a cracked foundation. No matter how good it looked, it couldn't reverse years of accumulated neglect and imbalance. Jenny's quiet struggle wasn't about drama, it was about survival. Every act of compromise, every swallowed insult, every silent endurance was a calculation. How much longer could she continue before she lost herself completely? Fans might recall the moments that looked like reconciliation on TV, the hugs, the apologies, the cheerful outings. But those were the surface. Beneath it, the imbalance was growing, unnoticed by many, invisible to most. Each social slight, every microaggression, the constant effort to adapt to a culture that never fully accepted her. Those were the real markers of tension. Sumit's blind spots, his comfort in routine, his assumption that love alone would be enough. Those were the cracks widening beneath the glamour of the cameras. Jenny's emotional labor extended beyond appearances. She handled bills, health concerns, cultural misunderstandings, and family politics. She absorbed insults with grace, smiled when she was frustrated, and maintained patience when patience had nothing left to give. She lived in a world where small missteps could trigger judgment, where being herself could be misinterpreted, where she was constantly measuring how much of her identity she could keep intact without disturbing the fragile peace. And then there were the moments that viewers might have missed entirely, the fleeting glances, the tense silences, the unspoken rules she had to follow just to survive a family gathering. Every interaction was a subtle negotiation, a balancing act where her dignity and identity were on the line. Sumit's good intentions didn't compensate for the lack of understanding, for the cultural blind spots, for the failure to recognize that love requires more than words. It requires action, protection, and reciprocity. By now, the tension is palpable. Fans might sense that something is coming, but they don't know when, where, or how. Every smile she gives, every nod she offers is masking exhaustion and slow heartbreak. The cracks are invisible, yet undeniable. This is where the story truly lives. Not in the grand wedding, not in the televised drama, not in the explosive fights, but in the quiet endurance, the invisible labor, the long, silent accumulation of emotional weight. Sumit's reliance on love alone, his comfort in cultural familiarity, and his blind spots created a gap that no apology could bridge. Jenny's sacrifices, her patience, and her silent suffering brought her to a point where endurance was no longer possible. The foundation of their relationship had been eroded slowly, invisibly, irreversibly. Fans saw smiles on TV, but behind those smiles was a woman calculating how long she could survive in a world that never fully accepted her, with a partner who didn't fully see what was happening. And that's what made what came next inevitable. Not a dramatic fight, not a last minute confession, not a tearful plea. Just a quiet, deliberate decision made by someone who had carried far too much for far too long. Jenny's departure wasn't the climax. It was the conclusion of years of invisible struggle, hidden sacrifices, and the weight of navigating love in a place that never felt like home. You won't believe how long she carried this weight alone. Jenny's morning began quietly, almost imperceptibly, the kind of start that conceals storms beneath calm surfaces. She moved around the apartment, making coffee, checking messages, tucking small items into her bag, each movement measured and deliberate. To any outsider, it looked routine. To anyone paying attention, it was a woman balancing the weight of years of emotional exhaustion. Each smile she offered, each nod was borrowed energy. She carried unspoken grievances, unmet needs, and a sense of safety that was constantly questioned in subtle ways. Her breaking point wasn't a loud fight, it was invisible, layered, and cumulative. Sumit, meanwhile, floated in a bubble of good intentions. He meant well, no doubt. He believed love alone could solve misunderstandings, patch over cultural friction, and carry them through family tensions. But his reliance on words over action, his trust that affection could replace effort, created blind spots. He didn't see the cracks widening beneath Jenny's calm exterior. And even when subtle warnings appeared, her hesitation at family events, the careful way she measured her responses, he interpreted them as temporary, trivial, or even overreactions. The audience might think she was just patient, just gentle. But patience has limits. Jenny's mental exhaustion had a rhythm, a pattern. Small events, like a casually dismissive remark at breakfast or a hesitant glance from Sumit's parents, triggered layers of stress that accumulated silently. Fans might recall moments when she smiled through discomfort. They might assume resilience. In reality, it was the quiet endurance of someone bearing emotional labor alone, negotiating loyalty, identity, and love without reciprocity. And just when you think this can't get worse, Jenny's day shifted in subtle but telling ways. A family comment at lunch, a micro gesture from Sumit, a hand lightly brushing hers, an apologetic tone that felt insufficient, highlighted the tension. It wasn't dramatic, but the audience could sense the imbalance. The viewers expecting confrontation or fireworks were getting something deeper. Silent heartbreak, patience pushed to the edge. Jenny could have snapped at any moment. The tension in those minutes was nearly cinematic, held in a quiet balance between visible composure and internal erosion. Sumit's inaction didn't stem from malice. He was complacent in his comfort. He relied on familiarity, on routine, on the assumption that his love was enough. But emotional reciprocity isn't passive. Jenny's subtle cues, the way she hesitated before speaking, the way she withdrew when a topic touched old wounds, the way she adjusted her smile to fit expectations, were signs he failed to read. Fans might label him oblivious or uncaring, but the truth is more nuanced. He acted with partial understanding, interpreting survival of the relationship as success, while the person most invested was silently unraveling. And just when you think this can't get worse, Jenny confronted a small but significant moment alone. Alone in a room, she examined her feelings. Not aloud, not dramatically, just internally. The mental calculus was brutal. The cost of staying versus leaving, the impact on self-respect, the erosion of emotional safety. Fans often assume hero or villain, love or betrayal, but here was nuance. Survival clashing with loyalty, love clashing with dignity. Would you stay if every day meant adjusting yourself to prevent others' discomfort? Never feeling fully safe? Never having your efforts recognized? Jenny's quiet breaking point was punctuated by gestures, silences, and micro actions that told a story no argument could. The way she folded a scarf, tightened her grip on a mug, or lingered a moment too long over a message. These were signs of accumulated strain. Sumit, seeing only what was presented, missed the subtle messaging entirely, and the audience, conditioned to expect high drama, might have missed it too. Yet the tension was electric, hiding in plain sight, waiting to tip over at any unpredictable moment. And just when you think this can't get worse, a seemingly minor family interaction sent subtle tremors through the day. A comment about tradition, a side glance between relatives, a tone of voice that conveyed judgment. All these micro moments reminded Jenny she was navigating not just a marriage, but a system that never fully embraced her. The audience often judges characters as good or bad, but this reality was messy. Love alone didn't shield her from cultural friction, neglect, or miscommunication. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was endurance. Sumit's behavior became even more telling when contrasted with Jenny's effort. He interpreted compliance as harmony, smiles as satisfaction, and his presence as adequate support. He failed to see that she was carrying the emotional labor of two people. Fans might debate whether he was failing her intentionally. In my opinion, it was ignorance layered with optimism, assuming that affection and presence alone could replace attentiveness, intervention, and true reciprocity. And just when you think this can't get worse, a minor misunderstanding with friends escalated silently. On camera, it looked trivial, almost comical. Off camera, it tested the limits of Jenny's patience. Each small test added another layer to the mental pile she was carrying. She could have reacted angrily or dramatically at any point. Instead, she maintained control, holding the narrative of her own life carefully, silently. The audience watching might have missed the stakes. Every smile she offered was now both armor and warning. The imbalance of emotional labor was stark. Jenny was expected to adapt to family norms, cultural traditions, and social expectations without recognition or support. Sumit relied on his natural comfort in these systems, taking for granted that love would bridge differences. The tension between effort and inaction became almost unbearable. The psychological impact was deep. Exhaustion, anxiety, and the slow depletion of self-esteem. Loyalty demanded patience, but the cost of survival was her sense of agency. And just when you think this can't get worse, she paused in the middle of the day, staring at her reflection. Fans saw a poised, cheerful woman. Inside, she measured her limits. Each memory, each unacknowledged act, each subtle slight stacked in her mind like bricks on a fragile wall. Would she confront? Would she finally erupt? The audience, conditioned for spectacle, expected drama. Instead, the tension was internal, almost suffocating. The narrative wasn't screaming, it was whispering, every word heavy with meaning. Sumit's good intentions frequently collided with reality. He acted when he saw obvious problems but missed the subtler emotional cues. He assumed loyalty meant endurance, smiles meant contentment, and cultural comfort meant happiness. He didn't realize that his passivity, his reliance on appearances, contributed to Jenny's internal collapse. Fans might instinctively choose sides, labeling one partner wrong and the other right, but the truth was a tangled web. Love and inaction, loyalty and survival, expectations and unmet needs intertwined until clarity was nearly impossible. And just when you think this can't get worse, Jenny received an unexpected reminder of her outsider status. A casual comment, a glance from a friend, a subtle exclusion. To viewers, it might have looked like nothing. To her, it was another reminder that no matter how much she sacrificed, her place was never guaranteed. Each micro interaction, each gesture, each silence reminded her that her emotional labor, patience, and loyalty were unseen. And yet, she held it together, maintaining composure in ways that few could appreciate. The contrast between audience assumptions and reality was stark. Fans often look for clear villains, dramatic fights, or bold declarations. Jenny's story offered none of these. Her endurance looked like compliance. Her patience looked like weakness. And Sumit, trying to act with affection, appeared attentive. But reality was different. The heroism was quiet, invisible, and emotionally exhausting. Survival required emotional labor that could not be televised, acknowledged, or applauded. And just when you think this can't get worse, a subtle gesture from Sumit, intended as reassurance, backfired. A hand placed gently on her shoulder, a tone meant to soothe, only reminded Jenny how alone she had felt for years. The audience might seek comfort. She felt the contrast. The years of unnoticed effort versus a single, visible act. It highlighted the imbalance, the inequity, the reality of enduring love without emotional reciprocity. Jenny's micro actions continued to speak volumes. The way she avoided conflict, the way she measured every word, the careful control of her expressions, all indicated the psychological toll. Fans might have assumed drama was imminent. Jenny proved otherwise. Every choice, every restraint, every silent endurance was a decision to maintain control over herself when the world gave her so little control otherwise. And just when you think this can't get worse, the day ended with another minor clash of expectations. An event planned without her input, a decision made for her, a small dismissal that reminded her she was still navigating someone else's comfort over her needs. The cumulative effect of these moments brought her closer to the breaking point, silently and invisibly, while Sumit remained largely unaware. Her quiet breaking point, the emotional labor imbalance, the cultural pressures, and the accumulated exhaustion all pointed toward an inevitable choice. The audience might have expected fireworks, shouting, confrontation. Reality offered none of that. Instead, the tension was in the gestures, the silences, the micro actions that told the story no fight could convey. Jenny's endurance was visible only to those who could read between the lines, and each day brought her closer to the moment when survival would demand a choice. And just when you think this can't get worse, the moment Jenny left, the internet erupted. Clips circulated immediately, fans dissecting every frame, every pause, every glance. Some hailed her as brave, applauding her courage to prioritize dignity and self-preservation over a marriage that silently drained her. Comments poured in. She finally did what we all suspected. Respect for choosing herself. Bravery is quiet, not loud. On the other side, a vocal group accused her of desertion. How could she just leave like that? Marriage vows are forever, right? She didn't fight for him. The split was stark, heated, and instantaneous, and it revealed far more about the audience than the couple themselves. Social media acted as a mirror, reflecting the cultural expectations and biases embedded in fans' perceptions. Loyalty was praised when performed visibly, but often criticized when exercised silently through endurance. The judgment wasn't just about Jenny or Sumit. It was about what people thought they would do in similar situations. Each comment revealed assumptions that love always requires confrontation, that patience without drama is insufficient, that leaving quietly equates to cowardice. The discourse became performative in itself, a theater where viewers projected morality onto an already complex situation. Fans' memory of previous dramatic moments influenced every opinion. Past episodes had set expectations: explosive fights, tears, confrontations with in laws. Audiences had learned to anticipate peaks of conflict, loud arguments, and ultimate reconciliation or public apologies. Jenny's exit defied this script. There was no shouting match, no dramatic ultimatum, just her absence, silent and decisive, leaving viewers grappling with discomfort they weren't prepared for. Did she really leave without saying a word? Became a recurring question across forums and comment sections, the disbelief tangible. And just when it seemed the conversation would die down, every fan theory collided with the subtle financial and professional pressures the couple faced. How would Jenny manage her career abroad? How would Sumit cope with the realities of shared financial obligations? Fans speculated endlessly, turning what was a private emotional decision into a public narrative of potential consequences. Many cliffhangers appeared naturally. Would this quiet exit eventually lead to reconciliation? Or was it the final chapter? Each post, each thread, each comment contributed to the collective suspense, keeping the story alive far beyond the televised moment. Humor crept into the chaos as social media users couldn't resist performative outrage. Memes appeared instantly, poking fun at the melodrama viewers expected but never received. One post read, 90-Day Fiancé episode ends with nothing. Another joked, she left quietly, guess Sumit can't read minds either. Even amidst tension, these observations gave relief, a reminder that the audience themselves were part of the entertainment ecosystem, their expectations shaping what felt like betrayal or heroism. The comments only scratched the surface of what actually happened. Beneath the memes, the accusations, and the applause, there was an emotional reality that the public couldn't fully witness. Jenny's departure was both simple and complex, a single act with layers of preparation, calculation, and self preservation. Her decision challenged conventional storytelling of reality TV. It wasn't the loud fight that defined the narrative, it was the quiet assertion of agency. Fans' inability to see that nuance became part of the fascination, prompting more debate, more posts, and more emotional investment in the story. And yet, even as viewers argued online, cultural context shaped their reactions profoundly. Some praised Jenny for escaping what they interpreted as a suffocating arrangement, aligning their approval with personal values around independence and autonomy. Others criticized her for failing to perform the expected struggle, equating a lack of drama with a lack of moral courage. Each perspective revealed personal biases about gender roles, marriage expectations, and cross cultural relationships, turning social commentary into a collective psychology lesson. The audience also reacted to Sumit's presence, or lack thereof, in public spaces and social media posts. Some sympathized with him, portraying him as a victim of misunderstanding, oblivious to the sacrifices Jenny made. Others blamed him for the neglect and the emotional inaction that led to her departure. Public opinion shifted depending on which clips or interviews were highlighted, demonstrating how storytelling is fragmented and incomplete when mediated through fan memory and selective social proof. And just when you think the reactions couldn't intensify further, whispers about financial and career implications began circulating. Questions about relocation, job prospects, legal status, and the fallout of a quiet exit added layers of suspense. Could Jenny maintain stability abroad? How would Sumit adjust? Would they reconcile publicly for appearances, or was this exit irreversible? Each speculation fueled engagement, keeping conversations alive across threads, platforms, and fan groups. The uncertainty itself became a driver of attention, compelling viewers to return to the story repeatedly. Subtle jabs at performative reactions continued to pepper social media. Fans critiqued each other as much as the couple. She's not dramatic enough for the show. Sumit should have done more. You guys are making mountains out of molehills. The humor underlined a tension between expectation and reality, showcasing how audiences construct narratives that suit their need for spectacle, even when reality defies easy categorization. Each sarcastic comment, each clever meme, and each exaggerated post reinforced the contrast between true emotional labor and what people wanted to see. The comments only scratched the surface of what actually happened. Beyond the online spectacle, the real emotional complexity persisted. Jenny's choices reflected years of unseen effort and subtle navigation through culture, family, and loyalty. Sumit's responses, well-meaning but insufficient, revealed how even love could be misinterpreted when paired with complacency and cultural assumptions. Fans could debate endlessly, but the reality remained. Her exit was decisive, quiet, and emotionally sophisticated in ways social media could never fully capture. As the weeks passed, the fan split deepened. Debates about morality, courage, and loyalty intensified. Each post referencing Jenny's quiet departure served as a reminder of the endurance required to navigate long-term emotional imbalance. The story also prompted broader discussions on expectations in cross-cultural marriages, emotional labor, and the invisible work often shouldered by one partner. Fans reflected on their personal relationships, comparing themselves to the characters, and questioning what it truly means to prioritize love, dignity, or survival. And just when you think the online chaos settled, another wave of speculation hit. Viewers questioned whether the silence would end in reconciliation, a televised confession, or permanent estrangement. Each post reignited debate, turning a quiet exit into a drawn-out drama of public imagination. Fans couldn't resist projecting endings onto the story. But the reality, the nuanced, deliberate, invisible emotional decision, remained largely beyond reach. Humor, empathy, and curiosity intertwined in fan commentary. Memes mocked expectations, threads analyzed gestures, and discussions debated moral choices. All of it reflected the gap between televised events and lived experience. Jenny's quiet exit disrupted the narrative fans anticipated. It wasn't performative, it wasn't confrontational, and it wasn't predictable. Her decision left viewers reflecting on the realities of emotional labor, cultural pressure, and self preservation, creating engagement that was as psychological as it was sensational. The comments only scratched the surface of what actually happened. Each reaction, meme, or analysis revealed audience fascination with drama, yet underscored a critical misunderstanding. Real heartbreak is rarely loud, often invisible, and seldom neat. Jenny's departure wasn't a spectacle. It was an assertion of self that challenged viewers to consider what matters in a relationship: appearances or authenticity, loyalty or survival, affection or action. Even weeks later, social media remained a living record of judgment, empathy, and curiosity. Fans continued to weigh in, sometimes changing sides depending on what clip or statement resurfaced. The debates highlighted something powerful. Emotional reality is complicated, messy, and impossible to distill into binary judgments. Jenny's quiet strength and Sumit's oblivious comfort fueled ongoing discussion, making this story linger far beyond the episode itself. And just when you think the story had reached closure, a final wave of speculation about financial stability and career paths renewed attention. Audiences wondered about long-term outcomes, practical consequences, and whether this quiet exit would echo into public perception for months, if not years. The fascination was relentless, the debate ongoing, and the narrative unfinished, because real-life decisions rarely conformed narrative expectations. The split opinions, the performative outrage, the memes, and the analytical threads all reinforced one truth. Social media reveals as much about the audience as it does about the couple. Jenny's quiet exit became a lens to examine cultural assumptions, emotional labor, and societal expectations. Fans became participants, their curiosity, judgment, and humor creating a second layer of narrative that no camera could capture. But the comments only scratched the surface of what actually happened. Beyond the screenshots, posts, and threads, the real emotional work, the years of compromise, endurance, and subtle self-preservation remained largely invisible. Jenny's choice wasn't about spectacle. It was about agency, dignity, and survival in a system that often undervalued both. Social media could debate endlessly, but it could not replicate the lived reality. Even as the online frenzy continued, the deeper lesson crystallized. Love alone is not always enough. Loyalty and patience have limits. Emotional labor, cultural friction, and unacknowledged effort quietly erode relationships. Jenny's exit forced viewers to confront the uncomfortable truth that survival sometimes demands silent, decisive action, and that the bravest choice isn't always the loudest. Fans still speculate. Who will reach out next? Will Sumit realize what he missed? Could Jenny find stability and peace abroad? These questions keep the conversation alive. The drama isn't in what's seen, it's in the ongoing tension between reality and perception, between emotional truth and public expectation. And just when you think this can't get more complicated, the final implication hits. Reality TV may capture moments, but it cannot capture years of unnoticed sacrifice. Jenny's departure was the ultimate reminder that invisible labor, quiet endurance, and the courage to choose oneself are far more dramatic than any on-screen argument. Jenny's exit didn't just end a chapter, it opened a new one. For herself, for Sumit, and for the story that fans thought they understood. She left quietly, but each step carried weight. This was not a dramatic flight. It was calculated, deliberate, a testament to emotional endurance finally reaching its limit. Jenny's growth became visible almost immediately. She was no longer shrinking herself to fit into a marriage that demanded invisibility. Every small act after leaving reflected a reclamation of dignity, a reassertion of boundaries that had been eroded over years. The silence that preceded her exit had been a shield, but now it became a source of strength. She wasn't just surviving, she was asserting her right to exist fully and unapologetically. Sumit, on the other hand, faced a different kind of reckoning. He had relied for years on love and familiarity, assuming that emotional commitment alone would sustain their marriage. But the quiet erosion he ignored began to crystallize into realization. He noticed the absence in ways that had been invisible before. The morning coffee he no longer shared, the casual smiles that had once masked exhaustion, and the subtle, empty spaces in conversations suddenly became impossible to ignore. Regret surfaced, not a public confession, but a personal acknowledgement of complacency, emotional blind spots, and a failure to recognize the depth of Jenny's sacrifices. He confronted a truth that viewers had long suspected: love without action can fail quietly and irreversibly. Financial and practical realities began to anchor the emotional consequences in the real world. Jenny's decision wasn't just about leaving a partner, it involved untangling her life logistically. Visa concerns, career stability, relocation challenges, and personal independence were now front and center. Her next moves required planning and courage that viewers often overlooked when swept up in the emotional spectacle. Meanwhile, Sumit had to confront the tangible fallout of her absence: shared responsibilities, unaddressed financial dependencies, and the public visibility of their breakup created pressures that went beyond emotion. They affected livelihoods, family expectations, and social standing. Each practical consideration added layers of tension, illustrating that relationships aren't just about feelings. They're woven with real-world obligations that amplify emotional stakes. And what she does next might shock even the most loyal fans. Every choice she made post-departure hinted at a growing self-awareness and strategic thinking that had been dormant during her marriage. Audiences had watched her adapt, compromise, and absorb cultural and familial pressures, often quietly and without recognition. Now, unshackled from those constraints, she could navigate her life according to her own rules, no longer negotiating her dignity or happiness for the comfort of others. Each small decision became a statement. Independence, self-respect, and emotional autonomy were no longer negotiable. Sumit's reflection mirrored a slow internal unraveling. He recognized patterns he had ignored: microactions that showed fatigue, repeated emotional unavailability, and the silent burdens Jenny carried. For someone accustomed to assuming that love equals understanding, the revelation was harsh. His complacency had allowed a slow collapse, one that neither dramatic confrontation nor public acknowledgement could undo. The subtle, almost invisible consequences of inaction were now glaringly obvious. Fans watching could relate or cringe as the realization unfolded that good intentions alone do not prevent heartbreak. Beyond the personal, the couple's situation illuminated a broader truth about public scrutiny. The financial, logistical, and practical implications of Jenny's departure extended to the audience itself. Fans speculated on how she would rebuild, where she would live, and how Sumit might recover. Reality TV's construction of narrative meant that speculation became a form of participation. People projected outcomes, debated morality, and tested predictions, turning the quiet exit into a prolonged social experiment. Each post, thread, and clip contributed to the emotional stakes, feeding curiosity and sustaining engagement long after the cameras stopped rolling. Jenny's growth also highlighted the nuanced power of self-preservation. The act of leaving wasn't reactive, it was proactive. She had absorbed subtle indignities, cultural isolation, and unequal emotional labor for years. Her exit demonstrated a mastery of timing, emotional intelligence, and self-respect. In many ways, her quiet strength became more dramatic than any shouting match or viral confrontation could have been. Viewers were forced to reconcile with the idea that courage does not always look like drama. Sometimes it looks like walking away with intention, dignity, and foresight. Sumit's journey, in contrast, became a cautionary tale. He represented the dangers of assuming emotional work is mutual when it is, in fact, uneven. For him, the consequences were immediate. Absence became visible, regret became internalized, and the reality of what had been overlooked could no longer be ignored. Fans were confronted with an uncomfortable truth: Love requires more than emotion. It demands awareness, participation, and consistent action. Without these, even the deepest affection can dissolve silently, leaving only regret and practical consequences in its wake. The practical ramifications added a layer of suspense to the story. Questions about visas, independence, and income streams became subtle cliffhangers in themselves. Would Jenny secure stability abroad? Would Sumit adjust to new responsibilities at home? The answers were not dramatic or televised, but they mattered more than any public argument ever could. The audience realized that real life stakes, logistical, financial, emotional, often carry far more weight than the televised spectacle they expect. And what she does next might shock even the most loyal fans. Each small action, each social media update, each practical choice. Jenny makes hints at a new phase, one where she defines her life on her own terms. It's a slow, unfolding narrative that challenges assumptions, raises questions about accountability, and redefines what viewers thought they knew about courage and love. The story teases future developments, suggesting shifts in power dynamics, potential reconciliations, or complete independence. The suspense lies not in confrontation, but in anticipation, in watching choices ripple outward into unforeseen consequences. The consequences extended into personal identity and emotional recovery. Jenny's departure allowed her to reconnect with parts of herself that had been compromised. Freed from constant adaptation to Sumit's cultural comfort, her emotional labor shifted from survival to growth. Each decision reinforced autonomy, seeking stability, asserting boundaries, and rebuilding confidence. For viewers, this transformation offered both inspiration and reflection. Sometimes the most meaningful victories are invisible, quietly reshaping a person's life without spectacle. Sumit's reflection also took on practical dimensions. Beyond emotional realization, he confronted gaps in his planning, reliance, and understanding. The absence of Jenny's labor forced him to engage with aspects of life he had previously taken for granted. Daily routines, familial expectations, and logistical responsibilities became tests of growth, accountability, and emotional insight. Fans saw a different layer of consequence. That quiet neglect can translate into tangible challenges when the supporting partner is gone. Financial implications intensified the stakes. Jenny had to consider income, relocation costs, and professional opportunities abroad, each decision carrying weight. Sumit faced potential disruptions in shared finances, household responsibilities, and public perception. These practical realities added tension to the narrative, emphasizing that relationships are complex systems and emotional decisions reverberate across logistical, financial, and social domains. And what she does next might shock even the most loyal fans. Each step forward is a narrative beat, an assertion of agency, and a potential pivot in the ongoing story. The audience remains invested because the consequences extend beyond immediate drama. They influence careers, finances, identity, and public perception. Every small choice promises ripple effects that keep speculation alive and emotional engagement high. The long-term stakes are not purely personal. They intersect with cultural and social dimensions. Jenny's exit challenged assumptions about gender roles, cross-cultural dynamics, and emotional labor in marriages. Sumit's realization highlighted the invisible work partners often overlook. Fans, in response, debated morality, courage, and practicality, creating a layered social conversation that extended the story far beyond its televised moments. The narrative arc concluded one chapter while opening multiple threads for the future. Jenny's emotional and practical growth, Sumit's reckoning, and the unresolved questions about independence, reconciliation, and responsibility created suspense that begged continuation. The story no longer relied on explosive confrontation. It relied on layered human behavior, unseen sacrifices, and strategic decision-making. And what she does next might shock even the most loyal fans. The implication for the next chapter is clear. Emotional intelligence, quiet courage, and practical foresight may redefine the outcome entirely. The audience is left anticipating, guessing, and emotionally invested, ready to follow the next stage of a story that began with a silent exit but promises ongoing drama, insight, and personal revelation.